Welcome to The Voice Behind the Hurt. I'm Cherie, and today we're stepping into something really personal and deeply human, and that's grief. It's not easy to talk about, but it's a part of how we heal together. Now, when I started this podcast, I shared that this was part of my own healing process. And if I'm honest, grief is something that I've always found really hard to face. It's an emotional topic for me, but I'm opening up today in hopes that it helps you feel a little less alone. So thanks for being here and walking through this with me. So, whether your loss is fresh, it just happened or happened recently, or it's decades behind you, and whether you're grieving a person or a relationship, maybe a dream, or even part of yourself, you're not alone. Grief doesn't follow a script. It doesn't respect calendars. It's present on holidays or just random days in the week. And it can be messy. And grief sticks with you. It's with you in those quiet moments. It's with you when the memories hit and they start come rushing in. And it's there in spaces that used to feel full of love. So this episode is a reflection. It's a reckoning. And it's a reminder that grief isn't just about death. It's about change, transition. It's about the life you had and the life you didn't ask for. So let's take a minute to understand grief. Grief is a natural part of being human. It shows up when we lose something meaningful. It might look like sadness or anger, sometimes confusion or numbness, and sometimes even relief. And all of those feelings are valid. They're okay to feel that. So while we often think grief in the context of death, it also can come from the end of a relationship, maybe a health diagnosis, losing a job, a dream, or like big life changes, divorce or infertility, or even moving away. Grieving is not a straight line. It's a loop. It's a wave. It's a spiral. And some days are better than others. Some days, no tears fall. There's no gut-wrenching pain. And the memories don't keep replaying over and over in your head. But then other days, it's the complete opposite. On those days, grief can feel like it's taking over, like it's heavy, like a boulder sitting on your heart or your chest or your mind. And sometimes the pain feels just as raw as if it just happened yesterday. And other times, you might be able to talk about it without shedding a single tear. Grief isn't balanced, and it's definitely not fair, but it is a natural part of life. Grief looks different to everyone. Grief can touch every part of us, emotionally, physically, mentally, even spiritually. It might show up as sadness or tears one day and frustration or guilt the next. Maybe you feel anxious or completely drained or like you just can't focus. Some people can't sleep, and then others sleep all the time. You might feel overwhelmed with sadness one moment, then suddenly irritated and full of guilt the next. Maybe you're anxious, you're totally drained, or you just can't seem to focus. You might lose your appetite. You might struggle to sleep or feel like you're running on empty. And sometimes there's just nothing, numbness. You might feel all of these things or none of it, and that's okay. Grief doesn't follow a rule book. And then we have people that feel like they might need permission to feel what they feel and do what they need. And if that's you, here's your permission. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel numb. It's okay if you can't sleep. It's okay if you just want to be alone. And most importantly, it's okay if you're not okay. Grief doesn't come with rules. Whatever you're feeling, it's valid. My journey with grief began when I was just 7 years old. My maternal grandfather, my Papa Jimmy, had passed away, and I remember feeling confused more than anything. I saw the pain in my family, especially my mom and my grandmother, my mama, but I didn't fully understand what was happening. And so after Papa passed away, my mom was visiting us at our house one day. We were sitting on the sofa, and I looked over at her, and she was crying. And I was confused because we were just watching TV. It didn't make any sense to my 7-year-old brain, but now I get it. Looking back, I feel very fortunate to not have had to deal with grief for much of my childhood. Later, when I was 17, grief really hit home. It was a week before my senior prom and just 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. And that's when grief really hit. My paternal grandfather, my Papa Roy, passed away. And I remember the day vividly. I was at school, I was in high school. It was my senior year. My younger brother, he's 16 months younger, he also went to the same school. And he came into my classroom and he was crying hysterically. And I had no idea why. And I asked him why he was crying. And he said he couldn't explain it. He just felt overwhelmed and he felt the need to cry. And I thought, okay, well, I wasn't as mature as I am now. And I thought, okay, that's weird. But I jumped into big sister mode and I tried to comfort him. And I went to my teacher's office and called my house, really expecting my dad to answer the phone. My dad had been at Johns Hopkins Hospital with my grandfather the night before. And so I just thought he had come home to get some sleep. So I was really expecting him to answer the phone. But my mom answered. And I knew something was wrong. So I asked her if she could talk to my brother and just let him know that Pop-Up was okay. And so she asked me to hold on. I heard her talking to my dad, but it was muffled. And she came back on the line and she asked if I wanted them to come get us from school. Of course, I was thinking, great, we get to leave school early. No problem, I'm not going to question it. And my brother went and got his belongings and came back to my classroom. And once we got the call that my parents were at the guidance office, we went upstairs. And as I'm coming down the hallway, I see a friend of mine named Charles. And Charles recently passed away. And so, I miss him a lot. When Charles saw me and he gave me the biggest hug, and he looked so sad and he said, "I am so sorry." I had no idea what he was talking about. I asked him, "What do you mean? I don't know what you mean." And I think he realized at that point I didn't know that Pop-Up had passed. And he just said, "I love you. I'll see you tomorrow." And he walks away. I don't think Charles ever knew how much that hug meant to me in the moments that were coming. And I wish I had told him. So as I went further down the hallway, I saw my mom standing in front of the door leading outside. So I said, "Hey, how's Pop-Up?" My mom started to cry. And at that moment, I knew my grandfather was gone. And I stopped dead in my tracks. I couldn't move for what felt like an eternity, but was only really a few seconds. I didn't know how to process that grief. And in that few seconds, so many thoughts went through my head. What happened? Did he suffer? How's my dad? Where's my dad? Is my dad okay? How's my mom? Where's my mom? That was my first real encounter with deep, soul-level grief. I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what was normal. I was sheltered from loss up until then, and suddenly it became all too real. Grief isn't something we just move on from. It becomes part of us. It shows up in our memories, in the laughs we share, in the moments we miss someone, and sometimes it sneaks in when we least expect it. Now, for some people, over time, grief softens. Life moves on, and we learn how to live a new normal. But for some, that healing doesn't always come. Grieving doesn't have a time limit. But when people feel that someone is quote unquote sad for too long, people tend to say things like, "You should be over it by now." Or, "They wouldn't want you to be sad." Or, "Time heals all wounds." When I hear comments like this, it makes me sad. It makes me angry. It makes me cringe. Grief may be a natural part of life, but everyone is different. We process in different ways. We mourn in different ways. And because of this, we sometimes become quote unquote stuck during the grieving process. Before 2013, if someone was stuck in this process, people tended to disregard their actions, their feelings, their behaviors. They were called dramatic, looking for sympathy. Children were labeled as acting out and not behaving in a normal way. But in 2013, studies were being conducted surrounding grief. And finally, as of March 2022, there was a name for these feelings, for being stuck. It's called prolonged grief disorder, or PGD. And it's a condition where that intense, debilitating grief, it stays stuck, not for weeks or months, but over a year, sometimes even longer than that. It's more than sadness. It's a daily, unrelenting ache that disrupts a person's ability to function, to connect, to work, and sometimes to simply live. People with PGD, they may feel as though a part of themselves died with the person they lost. They might constantly yearn for the deceased, avoid reminders of the loss, or feel like life has no meaning without them. And here's the thing, this isn't weakness. It's not holding on too long. It's not drama. PGD is real, and it's now officially recognized as a mental health disorder by the American Psychiatric Association. This is what happened to me with my maternal grandmother, with my mom. In 2003, specifically June 13th, 2003, I lost my mom, Evelyn. My mom was the absolute best friend I'll ever have, and I ever had. There was no one on the face of this earth that loved me like she did. And that was obvious. I never questioned that. When she got sick, it was such a long process. And when she died, it was the worst pain I have ever felt. If you've ever spent any significant amount of time with me, you know that I absolutely adored everything about my grandmother. Her dimples, her humor, her style, just everything about her was perfect to me. And I know if realistically in my brain, no one's perfect, but to me, she was perfect. And even now, as I talk about it, it's still hard. I've heard all the things people say, especially, you need to get over it. She's been gone for too long now. You still shouldn't cry. But if you've ever truly grieved, you know that's not how this works. And people mean well, but sometimes their words sting. And they say things they think are comforting, but they're not. Telling me she's in a better place doesn't soothe me. Because the best place she could be is right here with me. When life gets heavy and I feel like giving up, I still look for her. I look for her in memories, though. In signs, maybe that passing red cardinal, in my heart. Because even though she's not physically here, she's never truly left me. She lives in me. She lives in the way I love, the way I laugh, the way I remember her, my childhood. Memories of her are vivid. I could still hear her voice. I remember her perfume, Azure. I remember the softness of her skin. She used oil of Olay, and it made her skin feel so soft. And I remember kissing her cheek and telling her I loved her. I remember the shows she watched, the way she laughed. That contagious, beautiful laugh made everyone else laugh just because she was so full of joy. She was my person. She still is. She always will be. I loved her then. I love her now. And I'll always love her. One of the last memories of her that I have was in the hospital. The doctor had just come out of the room and told us there was really nothing else he could do for her. And so each of us in our own way started to say goodbye. When it was my turn, she looked at me and said, "I'm going to miss you." I told her, "I'll miss you too, but I'm going to be okay." She said, "I already told Annie Lane to take care of you," in the way that my grandmother made sure all of us were taken care of. I said, "Mom, I'm 23. I don't need anyone to take care of me." And she looked at me and said, "Yes, you do." Well, who can argue with that, right? I laughed it off, but she looked at me and she said, "I know you have a boyfriend." Now, at that time, for other reasons, and that's another podcast, I hadn't introduced anyone I was dating to my family. So I lied and I said, "I don't have a boyfriend." She said, "I know you do." And she looked so sad. That moment still haunts me. It'll probably haunt me till the day I die. I lied to the woman who raised me, who loved me unconditionally, and who deserved the truth, and I couldn't give it to her. I wouldn't. And now I have to live with that. And that's the thing about grief. Grief makes you revisit these moments. It makes you see everything you missed, but sometimes clouds your vision from everything you gained. but I gained so much by knowing her, by being loved by her, by being shaped by her. After she died, I got stuck in the grieving process. I was barely functional. I would go to work sometimes. Sometimes I wouldn't. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I couldn't maintain friendships. My relationship that I was in was over. I was engaged at that time. And that was one of the biggest reasons that my engagement was over. I called it off. I didn't want to be with anybody. I felt like at that time I wanted to die. I wanted to be with her because life could not go on without her. And I received counseling, and through counseling with an amazing therapist, I was able to move on and continue with the grieving process. I can't say every day is perfect. It's been 22 years now, and I still feel that pain some days like it was yesterday. And now, since that time, I've lost uncles, aunts, I've lost cousins, and I lost two incredibly close friends. They were both my age. And each time someone passed, I said, why not me? And I've never gotten that answer. Grief can come at inconvenient times. I remember working in an office telling a story about my paternal grandmother, my Mom Jane, who I later learned couldn't cook anything, but she tried. I remembered her chicken and dumplings. I thought they were the best thing ever. So years later, I asked her for the recipe. My daughter was, I think, 3 at the time. I said, Mom, before you die, because that's all I ever heard growing up, she was going to die. She wasn't ever going to be around all the time. I said, Mama, before you die, can you please give me the recipe for your chicken and dumplings? She said, I'll give it to you right now. And I was so excited. She said, go to the store and look for Sweet Sue's chicken and dumplings. It's in a blue can. I stopped writing and I looked at her and I said, those chicken and dumplings were fraudulent? She laughed so hard. I said, my whole childhood has been a lie. I was devastated and she thought it was hilarious. That memory sticks with me, and I've told that story to so many people. So one day a coworker of mine brought me a can of Sweet Sue's chicken and dumplings, and I burst into tears because to me it wasn't just a can. That was a memory. That was love. That was someone listening and like really listening and honoring my story. I kept that can for 2 months. And one day I forgot my lunch and I didn't want to spend any money. And I told my coworker who bought it for me, I wish I had brought my lunch. She said, you have a can of chicken and dumplings in your office. It took me an hour to work up the nerve to open that can. It sounds silly, maybe even crazy, but grief does that. It attaches itself to the smallest things, a scent, a sound, a can of soup or dumplings, and turns them into sacred relics. My paternal grandmother, my Mom Jane, passed away near Thanksgiving. On Thanksgiving Day, the year that she passed, I was at the sink washing dishes. My mom came up behind me, and I just broke down. Shoulders shaking, tears streaming, crying, because my grandmother was no longer there. We all have stories like this, I'm sure. And grief isn't just about death. It can be about jobs, friendships, relationships. At this current moment, I'm grieving a friendship, and I miss this person deeply. I think about this friendship a lot. I still pick up the phone to call, to text, to send a meme, but then I don't. And it hurts. And some days I may not cope in the best way or the most effective way, but I'm doing the best I can. I'm tender-hearted. I feel things and love deeply. With grief, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And sometimes we need support. And support to me may look different than support to you. And sometimes that support comes from within ourselves as well. So remember to be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. We are our harshest critics, and grief is not easy. And if your grief feels overwhelming or unmanageable, know that help is available and healing is possible. Grief, I've learned, is never about getting over it. It's about learning how to carry it and how to let it shape but not consume who we are. We talked about grief surrounding relationships. And that can be something like a breakup or divorce, engagements that are called off. That's grief too, because you build a life with someone and then they're gone. And it doesn't matter how or why, but what matters is they're not there anymore. As I mentioned earlier, I was engaged when I was 22, and that engagement was called off, and he has since passed away. When that relationship ended, it wasn't ugly. It just changed. I changed. Maybe he changed. But I remember that first night without him, and I sat on the arm of the sofa and I cried, and I talked on the phone to my friend Brenda, who's also passed, and I said, I'm never going to hear his keys in the door again. I'm never going to hear him say, "What's up, beautiful?" I'm never going to hear him laugh at my jokes or argue about who got into his cereal or call me at work to tell me about something he bought from the neighbor who used to fix things up from the trash can and the dumpsters. It was the little things, the things I thought would drive me crazy, that I missed the most. And grief is grief. The steps to cope are similar, but the journey is personal. The 12 steps of grief are real, and as we talked about, sometimes people get stuck. Only you can decide when you're ready to move forward. Only you can say, I've made it through this step. And the hardest thing about grief is acceptance. It took me years to accept that my grandmother was gone. I wasn't delusional. I wasn't seeing her when she wasn't actually there. I didn't imagine her sitting in her chair when she wasn't. But I refused to say she's not coming back. Because if I didn't say it, maybe it wasn't real. Grief is not a chapter that we close. It's all throughout our lives. It shows up in memories, shows up in laughter, in longing, and in quiet moments when we least expect it. As I've shared today, my grief has many layers. Some are tender, some are raw, some are still unfolding, and maybe yours does too. Whether you're grieving a person, a relationship, a dream, or a version of yourself that no longer exists, I want you to know you are not broken. You are not too much. You're not alone. Grief is love that lost its physical home, but it still lives. In stories, in recipes, in dreams, in the way we carry those we've lost forward with us. So if you're hurting, stay with me. Breathe. Speak your truth. Let your pain be seen. And know that here, in this space, your grief is honored. Thank you for being here with me today. If this episode resonated with you or someone you love, I invite you to share it and come back whenever you need a moment to feel seen. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Grief doesn't ask for permission, but healing begins when we give ourselves grace. Welcome back to The Voice Behind the Hurt, where we peel back the silence and give space to those stories that often go unheard. Today's episode is a powerful one. We're sitting down with someone who lives each and every day navigating not just one, but two chronic illnesses, a reality that demands resilience, demands grace, and a kind of strength most people never see. This isn't just about symptoms or diagnoses. It's about identity. It's about relationships and the quiet battles fought in someone's everyday life. So whether you're tuning in as a fellow warrior, a caregiver, or simply someone seeking to understand, this conversation is for you. Thank you for listening today. A deep and sincere thank you to Sabrina for sharing her story, for opening up about life with gastroparesis and POTS, and for reminding us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the quiet persistence of living each day with grace. If you've been moved, challenged, or awakened by what you've heard, know that you're not alone, and neither is Sabrina. Living with chronic illness isn't a chapter, it's a whole story. And every time we listen, we help rewrite the narrative from isolation to connection. Thank you for being a part of this space. Until next time, keep listening deeply and keep honoring the voices behind the hurt.